Good morning everyone, this is Carl Leonardia Sadra from Biped 1 and today I'll be discussing the physical education in primitive society. Primitive man moved in order to satisfy a felt need or necessity. He had to satisfy his hunger, so he had to search for food. This he did by hunting wild animals in the forest or by fishing along the rivers and streams. Sometimes he had to engage in warfare in order to ensure protection from his enemies. He had to erect shelter to protect himself from adverse elements or a hostile environment. During that time, supply of food are very limited. That's why he only hunt food that available in their surroundings. During primitive time, animals are their enemies. They engage in warfare for their safety and protection. What are the other physical activities during that time? During physical education in primitive society was practical, strong, and powerful in order to carry on the kind of living. Games are provided to the children to train themselves in adult life and their becoming responsibilities. Playing games became an important part of living. It became recognized way to improve strength, speed, skills, quality that necessary for survival. Dance became a main expression, particularly in a certain tribal society. Also, through dancing, people communicated to their thoughts. The physical activities of primitive man were not organized. His motive for physical activity were mainly to search food and protect himself from his enemies. However, his gregarious nature, his innate drives for mating and propagation give him a desire to dance and play. All these physical activities of primitive man were very much unorganized.
China is one of world's oldest civilization. China embraced the sedimentary lifestyle. Their activities are more preferred to those that are rich or belong to the high-class families in society. Chinese classic shows that such families engage in music, dancing, and archery. The popular dances were the skill dances such as split feather dance, wall feather dance, battle dance, and the Hungary dance. Some of their sports are wrestling, jiu-jitsu, polo, tap river, rope flying, and the working games. As early as 2698 BC, a form of medical gymnastic was developed. The people who discovered that gymnastic could help them become active and realized that kind of gymnastic could provide cure for their illness. Kung Fu was the earliest of exercise recorded in history.
India. Like that of ancient China, the religious life of the people affected their concern for their physical well-being. Their religion's belief stressed reincarnations of the soul before being united finally with Dharma, the supreme goals. They believed that to attain this goal was to concentrate solely on the spirit rather than physical needs. They had to refrain the catering the physical body and most not enjoy worldly things. There are, however, evidence of participations of physical activities. The history of dance mentions Hindu dancing as the oldest of organized dancings. Some of the favorite pastime of the people were throwing balls, dice, tumblings, chariot race, marbles, ridings, elephants, blowing contests, horse riding, wrestling, wordmanship, boxings, and dancing. Some of traditional sport in India is Kho, Kalabadi, Malakhambh, badminton, wrestling, Pilwani, and many more. A great contributions of India to physical education is yoga, which is composed of the exercise of posture and regulate breathing. Although this is a religious activities in India, It is being accepted today as important activities to discipline the mind and the body because it involved 84 different positions.
So now I will discuss the ancient Near East countries. Ancient Near East countries. Countries in the ancient Near East referred to the ancient countries of Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Syria, Palestine, and Persia. It is in the civilization of this country which marks the turning point in the history of physical education. The Egyptians believed in living a full life. This meant a life full of physical activity. The Egyptian young boys were instructed in the use of various weapons of war such as the bow and arrow, lance and shield. They engaged in many sports and gymnastic exercises. In dance, the Egyptian women danced for royal entertainment. An evidence of this can be seen in ancient Egyptian carvings. The main objective of Persia was the building of an empire through military aggression. As early as 529 BC, King Cyrus encompassed the area now referred to as the Middle East. This was made possible by their belief that a strong Persian army was a healthy and physical fit army. The state trained the 6 years old in such events are running, slinging, shooting the bow, throwing a javelin, hunting, and marching. A soldier was trained to endure all sorts of hardships, which included travel without food and clothing. There was no training of the intellect. The program of physical activity was directed towards the building of strength, conquest, and aggrandizement. However, the decline of this great empire started when the soldiers, basking in the glory of their exploits, indulged in activities which caused their moral decadence. So that's all in ancient Near East countries. Now let's proceed to physical education in Greece. Physical education had its golden age in ancient Greece. The two city-states which give physical activities much importance were Sparta and Athens. However, these states were exact opposites in their objectives of physical education. In Sparta, the main objective of physical education was to contribute to a strong and powerful army. The individual existed for the state so that he did not enjoy individual freedom. Only the strong and in Athens, the individual's life was not controlled and regulated as in Sparta, and he enjoyed individual freedom. The objective of physical education was physical perfection with emphasis on beauty of gymnastics was believed to contribute to physical development, and music was also considered important for the intellect. Gymnastics and music were considered as the two most important subjects in the curriculum. It was always claimed that gymnastics was for the body and music for the soul. Greece laid the foundation for the present Olympic Games, which were first held in 776 BC and continued every 4 years thereafter. In these games, a contestant had to undergo a rigid screening. He had to be a free man without any criminal record. He had to be in perfect physique and of good character. He had to be in training for 10 months. He had to compete in accordance with the rules. In the oath which he had to take that he would not use any illegal tactics to win, he had to swear with his father, brothers, and sisters. A number of Greek philosophers, teachers, and medical men contributed to the worth of physical education, and among them were the following. Herodotus recognized the use of physical education as an aid to medicine as early as the 5th century. Galen stated that the physical education is a part of hygiene and subordinate to medicine. Hippocrates proclaimed the law of use and disuse of the parts of the body. The parts of the body are strengthened through use, and disuse result in muscle atrophy or weakness. Socrates gave emphasis on the importance of physical education, attaining health in order to achieve one's purposes in life. Grave mistakes caused by poor decision can be a result of poor health. Plato considered gymnastics and music as the two most important subjects in the curriculum. Aristotle recognized the close interrelationship of the body and soul, and that mental faculties can be affected by poor health. He also prescribed progression of exercises can result in harm to the body. Xenophon thought of physical education as important in terms of the military, and that essential to success in life in soundness of the mind and body. So in physical education in Greece, it focuses on military training. So now, let's proceed in physical education in Rome. A great and well-disciplined army with great leaders brought about the grandeur of the Roman Empire at the time when almost all of Europe was under its influence. The objectives of physical education in Rome affected the sound objectives held by the Greeks whom they conquered. So in Rome, it focuses on military training. Army life was considered very important to the Romans, considered health as important only for military life. In order to be top physical shape for the army, a Roman soldier had to engage in various physical activities following a rigid schedule of training. In Rome, there are vigorous physical activities like marching, jumping, running, throwing the discus, and javelin swimming, among others, were included in the body conditioning program. He had to be ready at a moment's notice to serve the state from 17 to 60 years of age. Glory or success of imperialistic policy of the Romans, however, affected the values and interests of the Roman soldier. He now considered wealth as an objective, and his interest was on material things. He got disinterested in physical activities and enjoyed more being a spectator rather than being a participant. He also preferred the gory, ghastly, sensational gladiatorian combats to clean, wholesome events. The enormous amount of money given as rewards or prizes and game competition pointed to the influence of wealth and materialism of the Romans. Morally and spiritually, the Roman Empire declined and at last crumbled before the strong tectonic barbarians. Historians note that the most outstanding cause of the fall of the great Roman Empire was due to moral decay and physical deterioration. So that's all in physical education in Rome.
Physical education during the Dark Ages. During the Dark Period, two major movements grew out which swept over Europe: asceticism and scholasticism. These movements affected tremendously physical education. Christianity grew and thrived in this period with the ascetic belief that one can attain high spiritual level through solitude. Mortification of the flesh, and devotional completion. These people did not believe in worldly pleasure, but life should be a means of preparing for the world. The body should be tortured and not improved. The body is evil. A Christian emperor, these were believed as being pagan. The costume and practices as they resulted in poor health and shattered nervous system of people.
Feudalism, also known as the feudal system, was the combination of the legal, economic, military, cultural, and political costumes that flourished in medieval Europe between the 9th and 15th centuries. Broadly defined, it was a way of structuring society around relationships that were derived from the holding of land in exchange for service or labor. Although it is derived from the Latin word feudum or feudal, which was used during the medieval period. The term feudalism and the system which it describes were not conceived of a formal political system by the people who lived during the Middle Ages. The classic definition by Francis Louis Ganshoff in 1944 describes a set of reciprocal legal and military obligations which existed among the warrior nobility and revolve around the three-case concept of lord, vassals, and fiefs. A broader definition of feudalism, as described by Mark Black in 1939, includes not only the obligations of the warrior nobility, but the obligations of all three states of the realm: the nobility, the clergy, and the peasantry, all of whom were bound by a system of manorialism. This is sometimes referred to as a feudal society. Since the publications of Elizabeth A. R. Brown's The Tyranny of a Construct in 1974 and Susan Reynolds' Fiefs and Vassals in 1994, there has been ongoing inconclusive discussion among the medieval historians as to whether feudalism is a useful construct for understanding medieval society.
Physical education during the Renaissance period. The Renaissance period, which came after the Dark Ages, lasted until the beginning of modern times. This was called the revival of learning, which also brought about the dignity of man and a renewed spirit of nationalism. This period also had its impact on physical education. The theory that the body and the soul were inseparable and invincible became popular. It was the belief that the good physical health promoted learning, and the rest and recreation were needed by the body after the study and work. The Renaissance period helped to interpret the worth of physical education to the public. This was with the belief that it was necessary for health as a means of developing the body, as a preparation for warfare, and a means of providing recreation for the wealthier classes of people. It, however, failed to recognize the important contribution of physical education to the aesthetic, social, and moral life in general.
Physical education in modern Europe. The history of physical education in modern European countries is reflected in the contribution of these countries, the growth and advancement of physical education, which is also associated with names of its contribution. Friedrich Ludwig John, 1778 to 1852. His name is associated with the Turnverein and Association of Gymnasts, which he inaugurated to help German youth into strong and hardy citizens. Installed in a youth a love for gymnastics because of his belief that physical education is a means of aiding the growth and development of children, and that a country could be made strong through physical education. Next is Adolf Spiess, 1810 to 1858, founder of school gymnasts in Germany. Helped to make physical education a part of school life. His thought about physical education. Physical education should be required of all students. It should receive the same consideration as other objects is the curriculum. The physical education program should be progressive, starting with simple exercises and producing to the more difficult. Physical education in Sweden. Peer physical education in Germany. Johann Bernhard Basedow in 1723 to 1790 established a school called Philanthropium, the first school in modern Europe that offered a program where physical education was a part of curriculum. Johann Christoph Friedrich Matz, 1759 to 1839, wrote two books, Gymnastics for the Young and Games, which contained illustrations of various exercises and apparatus. Arguments in favor of physical education institutions, often referred to as one of the founders of modern physical education in Germany. Friedrich Ludwig John, 1778 to 1852. His name is associated with the term Heinrich Ling, 1776 to 1839. His name is symbolic of the rise of physical education in Sweden. Strove to make physical education a science, stressed that through anatomy and physiology, one would be better able to understand the human body and its needs, and apply activity intelligently through the scientific approach. Established the Royal Central Institute of Gymnastics to prepare teachers in three categories of gymnasts: educational, military, or medical. His objective of physical education was to develop the body to its fullest extent, to restore health to the weak, and make the country strong to protect against aggressors. Lars Gabriel Branting, 1799 to 1881, spent his time in medical gymnastics. His teachings were based on the premise that physical activity
The physical education in America. The colonial period in America was not conducive to organize physical education programs. The religious belief of the Puritans did not favor play, and so they lived a life of austerity and stern discipline. There was later emphasis given to any form of physical activity because it was true of as waste of time. There were some people, however, who brought with them the sport from their mother country, like the Dutch, whose favorite sport was bowling. The national period in United States history began to recognize physical education as important to American society. German gymnastics were introduced, Turnverein Association were organized, later was introduced the Swedish movement, Cure in America. Notable also at this period were the building of gymnasium and the formation of gymnastic and athletics club. Outstanding leaders, an event affecting physical education during the Civil War, where Turnverein societies were established and give support to physical education in the public school. Normal School of Physical Education established for training teachers. Swedish gymnastics was recognized for inherent medical values. Tennis was introduced in 1874. Golf came to America in the late 1880s. Bowling had been popular since the time of the early Dutch, but in 1895, the American Bowling Congress was recognized. Basketball was invented by James A. Smith. Dr. Dolly Allen Sargent was known for his work in teacher preparation, remedial equipment, exercise device, college organization, and administration. Measurements, experimentation as basis for activity and scientific research. Contributors in the development of physical education in the early 20th century. Thomas Denison Wood introduced natural gymnastics, which give more emphasis on giving and game skills. Clark Hetherington, emphasis on children's play activity. G.C. Bancroft influenced the development of physical education as responsibility of homeroom teachers in the elementary schools. Jacob Riis, symbolic of the modern movement in New York. At the mid-20th century, athletic sport and team games have become more important. Broad and extensive programs have been established in schools, recreational organizations, and other agencies.
Physical education in the Philippines. Physical education in the Philippines date back to primitive society when physical activity was very important for survival, making it necessary for the adult to teach physical skills to the young. With the past changing time, it is quite interesting to note the strides made by physical education and how it has affected the lives of the Philippine people. During the Spanish period, the aborigines of the Philippines, the Negritos or Indians, had a way of life the same or similar to any other peoples living in primitive society. There were no barrier of wandering tribes who lives mainly by hunting with expert use of the bow and arrow. The only motivation for physical activities were for survival in connection with their quest for foods and for protection against a hostile environment. They had to run, leap, jump, and climb, and this activity kept them physically fit. The Negrito chieftain was selected by his physical prowess, and evidence of this including the Maragtas and accent manuscript found in Panay written in AD 1212. This historical document mentioned about the unusual ability and bravery of a Negroes named Maricodo who had the skill in capturing wild animals by himself without the assistance of anyone or even a dog. He was always known for his spectacular skill in the use of the bow and arrow. For this, he was selected to succeed his father as chief of the tribe. The Negritos living in the mountain of the Bataan, Zambales, and Tarlac are found to be fond of music and dance. They possess crude musical instruments made of bamboo and mountain cane with a vaca, quiver, and played like a violin. Among their dances and imitate of their way of life such as Jona Kamote.
performed by a man going through the motion of stealing kamots in the field, and Pinapanilan, also performed by the man going through the motion of gathering honey from a tree. The fact that there are still primitive dance movement of the birds of the Philippine way up in their mountain tribes and can give us the right. The fact that there are still primitive dance movement of the birds of the Philippines way up in their mountain tribes can give us the clue that primitive dancing among these Ireless people existed. History gives an account of the waves of people who have migrated to the Philippines. The Indonesian and the Malays, those who arrived earlier, were driven to the hinterland, while the later waves of Higmer settled along the coast in the lowlands. Physical activities consist of producing food through planting and cultivating the mountainsides until they produce the famous Banawi rice terrace, one of the wonder of the world. Pagan people as they were, they worshipped their gods and made offering to the Onitos or spirit. Dancing was a form of religious activity and they danced to please their gods. They also danced to cure the sick, to make things happen as when there was truth that there wanted rain. And they also danced after a bountiful harvest. They danced for a victory in a tribal war which they term as Kanao. The people in the lowlands, especially those who settled along the river banks, had bathing and swimming as their favorite pastime. Father Chirinos relates in his relation de las Islas Filipinas that men and women and even children swim like fishes. They take a bath in the river and lake at any time of the day for cleanliness or recreation. Cockfighting is an ancient sport in the Philippines. Pigapita, the chronicler of Magellan expedition, mentioned it is one of the notable signs they saw in island of Palawan. Historians believe that this sport is probable to have been introduced by the Malay as early as AD 1212 during the rule of Datu Swabakil of the island of Panay. Pigapita was also impressed with the dance with which they were entertained by very adept dancing made into the companies of crude musical instruments. This sought Father Collins' observation of the early dance state that their dance generally with a beating of the drums with measured variation which found comfort of no suspect, especially in a war dance. And with such grace and vivacity that they have not been judged as undignified but which added to the solemnity of the festivities. The Spanish regime, the Spanish conquest of the Philippines did not have much effect on the physical activities of the people. The Spanish regime, the Spanish conquest of Philippines did not have much effect on the physical activities of the people, except the enforced labor among the lower classes of people in the building of churches. The people generally has a sedentary living while watching for the harvest. The people generally had sedentary living while waiting for their harvest time after planting. Fray Gaspar de San Agustin who published a story of the Augustine mission in the Philippines in 1725. Fray Gaspar de San Agustin was published a story of the Augustinian mission in the Philippines in 1725 wrote about the Filipino as sleepy sludges little inclined to work. This was corroboration by Dr. Rizal when he wrote The Indolence of the Filipino.